History, the young nation was dotted with forts and this reconstructed one called Frontier Town. Looking at these buildings today, it's not too difficult to imagine a time in the 1790s when this blockhouse might have been part of an outpost in the Ohio Valley. After the Revolutionary War, many Americans were pushing westward across the Appalachian Mountains, far from the towns and cities along the coast. For safety, they looked to such outposts as Fort Pitt, now Pittsburgh, Fort Washington, now Cincinnati, or any one of the many forts erected by military expeditions and early settlers. Let's imagine ourselves in the 1790s in a frontier fort. It's daybreak. In one of the cabins in the fort, a boy, Daniel Knight, is still asleep. "Chores to be done," says Mother. "A body can't sleep all day." Daniel was named after that great leader of the frontier, Daniel Boone, who was opening up the Wilderness Road about the time young Dan was born back east in Pennsylvania. But this is a long way from Pennsylvania, and work begins early on the frontier. Already Dan's father is going to the forest with a friend. The rifle always goes with him. There are still Indians about. After finishing a breakfast of corn pone and milk, Dan is ready for his chores. His job this morning is to hoe the weeds in the small garden plot near the fort. He stops to see the blacksmith hard at work making a new horseshoe. A boy of the frontier needs to learn all he can about the tools and other things made by simple hand industry in the wilderness. Dan knows how much his father and other men depend on the simple tools of the frontier. Father's job this morning is cutting trees in the forest. On this land, Father and his friend Simon will be able to plant crops next spring. But more important right now are these trees, which will be used to build a stockade for the fort. Father has seen stockades at other forts on the journey west, and he hopes to have this kind of protection against a possible Indian attack. Simon agrees with Father that the stockade must be built soon. Meanwhile, they and the other people of the fort can rely on the blockhouse for defense until the stockade can be finished. In the afternoon, Dan's chore usually is gathering firewood deep in the forest. What was that? It's the Perkins family. They live out a few miles west of the fort. But why do they have their cow and some of their household things? "It's Indians," says Mrs. Perkins. "A scout brought word to us that Indians are attacking another fort to the west and may be headed this way. We're aiming to get to the blockhouse. But we walked a long way and we're pretty tuckered out. We've come to warn your people at the fort, Daniel." Dan will run ahead and warn the fort now. There's no time to lose. If the Indians come this way, they'd better be ready. There's Old Timer. Better tell him. "The Perkins family is coming in. Indians west of their cabin." "Everybody out." There's a heap of getting ready. Every family will leave their cabin to go into the blockhouse in case of Indian siege. Fill up every water bucket. Bring every powder horn and rifle to the blockhouse. Take along plenty of gunpowder. Food must be brought to the blockhouse too. Dan's mother is worried about the family sheep out grazing where the Indians might get them. Father's out in the forest. He can't bring the sheep in. Dan, it's up to you. And be careful. Dan runs past the Perkins family, now safely within the settlement. Have the sheep wandered very far? Here they are. Now to get them to the fort. Losing the sheep would mean losing wool and meat. He made it. The sheep and other livestock can be protected by gunfire from the blockhouse. By now, people for miles around have come to the fort. Here's Peter Trumbull, the scout. Once a soldier in the Revolution, he's now a well-known frontiersman. He tells Mrs. Knight that her husband and Simon are going to stay out in the forest as lookouts. And Daniel says he's brought the sheep safely in. Inside the blockhouse, the defenders of the fort are on the upper level. Dan comes up to find Old Timer busy. If an attack does come, he says, we'll need you, Dan, to load guns. So watch me close now. Measure the powder, careful-like, and pour it into the barrel. Take your wad of cloth and put it between the powder and the bullet. Ram it all down with a ramrod. That's it. There now. She's ready to fire. If the Indians try to come close, we can shoot through the portholes, says Old Timer. Dan wonders why the Indians try to kill the white people and burn their settlements. Why are they so warlike? Well, says Old Timer, the Indians are fighting to defend their homelands. The Old Timer can remember not long ago when he lived in friendship with the Indians. In the early days of settlement, Indians often helped the white hunters and trappers. As they traded and bargained together, they learned something of each other's ways, and often they lived in peace. But now, Old Timer explains, the Indians feel they are being driven out. With so many settlers coming to take over the land for farming, the Indians no longer can hunt and live on this ground as they have always done, and so they fight to drive the settlers back. All through the night, the men take turns standing watch inside the blockhouse. Dan tried to stay awake like the men, but even a frontier boy gets sleepy. And so the hours pass until dawn. Oh, in the blockhouse! Let us in! Careful, might be an Indian trick, says Old Timer. It's all right! Let us in! Dan recognizes his father's voice. Father and Simon have scouted the forest, and the Indians are gone. There's no attack. And so, for now, the danger is over. Though there will be many such Indian scares for every real attack, the settlers know they must always be prepared. Now Dan can take the sheep out again, and the men can continue their work, cutting logs to finish the stockade, for they know that new settlers will be coming to join them. And new settlers do keep coming from the east to the fort. Looks like we're getting more neighbors, says Father. This is a sight they'll be seeing often. More people moving westward into the lands that will become before too long, the new states of Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, and others. The new settlers, too, were warned of the Indians. They will welcome a chance to rest at the fort before they push on westward. Father wants to know, what is the news from back east? Well, they're talking about building a road west from Pennsylvania. Instead of using pack horses, people may be coming west in wagons. Then many thousands more will come west into these lands by the time young Dan has grown to manhood. And someday, there'll be a new frontier farther west, and new lands of opportunity. The settlers will build more forts for protection, And someday, Dan and his family and other families will see growing towns and cities, permanent settlements that will replace the four frontier.